The Mafia boss found me where I never should have been, broken and sobbing in his private closet, surrounded by the expensive suits that smelled like danger and cologne. The moment those dark eyes landed on me, I knew two things with absolute certainty. My carefully maintained facade had just shattered, and the most dangerous man in Chicago was about to make my problem his war. I pressed my shaking hands against the expensive wool of the Mafia boss's Navy-style suits hanging in his private office closet, trying desperately to stop the violent sobs tearing through my chest, when the door suddenly swung open and harsh light flooded the darkness, catching me crumpled on the floor like something broken and discarded. Standing there in the doorway, filling the entire frame with his 6'4" presence that always made the room feel smaller and more charged with danger, was the Mafia boss himself, the man whose name rival gangs refused to speak aloud. The man whose morning briefings I organized at exactly 6:45 a.m. The man whose braided hair, neck tattoos, and dark, unreadable eyes had made hardened criminals beg for mercy. Now those eyes were locked on me, and his expression was shifting from cold calculation to something I'd never witnessed before, something that looked dangerously close to genuine, unfiltered concern. For 11 months, I had maintained the perfect facade of the unshakable personal assistant, the woman who never flinched when blood-stained soldiers reported back from operations, who never questioned the encrypted phone calls that lasted until 3 a.m. or the weapons deals discussed over breakfast like ordinary business transactions, who kept my composure steady and my voice professional even when his dangerous world pressed against my carefully constructed boundaries like a knife against skin. I had been so careful, so meticulously controlled, managing his chaotic empire with precision scheduling and flawless execution, keeping my growing feelings for him buried so deep beneath layers of pencil skirts and neutral expressions that I sometimes almost convinced myself they didn't exist at all. But now, everything was shattering around me like glass under a hammer, and the one person I never wanted to see me vulnerable was staring at me with an intensity that made my already erratic heartbeat threaten to break through my ribs entirely. "Nova," he said. And the way my name left his mouth in that deep, commanding voice that usually ordered executions and territory seizures made something inside my chest split wide open, because there was a softness there that seemed impossible coming from a man who reportedly burned down an entire cartel compound without blinking. He stepped into the closet, which suddenly felt impossibly intimate with his broad shoulders and powerful frame consuming all the air, and I watched through tear-blurred vision as he crouched down slowly, deliberately, until we were eye level, a gesture so unexpected from a man who never lowered himself for anyone that I forgot how to breathe. His hand reached out, rough and warm against my jaw, tilting my face up with surprising gentleness, so I had no choice but to meet those dark, storm-filled eyes that seemed to see through every wall I'd ever built. "Who made you cry?" he asked quietly, dangerously. "And how would you like me to handle them?" The question should have terrified me, should have reminded me exactly what kind of man I worked for. What kind of violence lived behind those tailored suits and calculated movements? But instead, something desperate and warm unfurled in my stomach, because for the first time in my entire life, someone was offering to shoulder my burden, to eliminate my problems with the kind of permanent efficiency that only a man like him could provide. I opened my mouth to lie, to brush it off as nothing, to maintain the professional distance that had kept me safe and employed for these past 11 months. But the words died in my throat when I saw the way his jaw clenched, the way his free hand curled into a fist against his thigh, as if he was physically restraining himself from hunting down whoever had caused my tears. And I realized with startling, frightening clarity that lying to him right now would be impossible, because he would see through it the way he saw through everything else. "It's nothing you need to worry about," I managed to whisper, even though my voice cracked halfway through, and fresh tears spilled down my cheeks, hot and humiliating against my skin. It's personal. It's my problem to handle, and I apologize for breaking down in your office during work hours. It was completely unprofessional, and it won't happen again. His eyes narrowed dangerously, and I watched his expression shift into something darker, something that reminded me exactly why rival cartels avoided Chicago's South Side when they knew he was there. Why his reputation in the underground was spoken with a mixture of respect and terror that bordered on mythical. Nova Scott, he said slowly, deliberately, as if explaining fundamental rules I'd somehow missed. In the 11 months you've worked for me, you have never once been late, never once made a mistake, never once flinched when violence walked through our doors, and never once shown me anything but perfect composure, even when situations would have broken lesser people. He leaned closer then, close enough that I could see the small scar cutting through his left eyebrow, close enough that his presence wrapped around me like a shield. So when I find you hiding in my closet, crying like your world is ending, it becomes my problem whether you want it to be or not. You're mine to protect. Do you understand? The possessiveness in his tone should have sent warning bells screaming through my head, should have reminded me that this was a dangerous man who controlled territories and commanded armies, who didn't understand boundaries because he'd never needed to respect them. But instead, I felt something inside me break completely, like a dam that had been holding back months of fear and exhaustion finally giving way under impossible pressure. My brother, I choked out, the words escaping before I could stop them, before I could remember all the reasons why dragging the Mafia boss into my messy, desperate disaster of a personal life was the worst possible decision I could make. Caleb, he's been... My voice shattered. The Vasquez cartel took him, last night. They're demanding... His expression went completely still, deadly still, the kind of stillness that came before explosions. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I had just changed everything. The transformation happened so fast I almost didn't catch it. 1 second, the Mafia boss was crouched before me, his hands still gentle against my jaw, his dark eyes filled with that impossible softness. The next second, that softness vanished completely, replaced by something so cold and lethal it made the temperature in the closet drop 10 degrees. His entire body went rigid, every muscle coiling with deadly purpose, and when he stood, pulling his phone from his pocket with mechanical precision, I realized I was watching a switch flip, from the man who just promised to protect me to the kingpin who ruled Chicago's underworld with an iron fist. "Mobilize everyone," he said into the phone, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "I want every soldier we have on standby, every informant activated, every contact pressed. Someone took something that belongs to me, and I want them found within the hour." He paused, his jaw clenching so hard I could see the muscle tick beneath his tattooed skin. "And Marcus? Tell them this is priority alpha. Anyone who doesn't respond immediately is out, permanently." He ended the call without waiting for a response and immediately dialed again, then again, and again. Each conversation was brief, clipped, efficient, orders delivered with the kind of authority that expected absolute obedience. I watched from my position on the closet floor, still trembling, as he orchestrated what felt like a military operation with nothing but his voice and his reputation. And the terrifying part? I wasn't afraid of him. I was afraid of how safe I felt watching him work. How protected. How desperately I wanted to believe that this dangerous, impossible man could actually fix the unfixable nightmare my life had become in the span of 12 hours. "Stand up," he said suddenly, tucking his phone away and extending his hand toward me. His voice had softened slightly, just for me, and something about that shift, the way he could be lethal one moment and gentle the next, made my heart stutter painfully in my chest. "You're not sitting on my floor anymore, Nova. Not while I'm handling this." I took his hand because refusing felt impossible and the moment his fingers closed around mine, warm and strong and steady, I felt that same dangerous warmth spread through my entire body. He pulled me to my feet with effortless strength, then guided me out of the closet and into his massive office, where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago skyline, and everything, from the mahogany desk to the leather furniture, screamed power and wealth and control. The office door burst open before we'd taken 3 steps, and suddenly the room was flooding with people. Men in dark suits with weapons holsters visible beneath their jackets. Women with tablets and earpieces who immediately began coordinating logistics. The Mafia boss's inner circle, his most trusted soldiers, all responding to his summons with frightening efficiency. "Clear the room," he commanded without looking at them, still holding my hand. "Everyone except Marcus and Theo. The rest of you, start working the contacts. I want the Vasquez cartel's every movement tracked, every safe house identified, every known associate questioned. Go." They moved like shadows, disappearing as quickly as they'd arrived, until only 2 men remained. One was tall and lean with calculating eyes. Marcus, his second in command. The other was broader, scarred, with the look of someone who'd seen too much violence. Theo, his head of security. "Sir," Marcus started, his voice carefully neutral. "The Vasquez cartel hasn't made contact with us in 8 months. Not since the territory dispute in—" "I know," the Mafia boss cut him off coldly. "Which means this is personal. They didn't take the brother of a random woman. They took her brother." His grip on my hand tightened protectively, possessively. "They know who she is. They know she works for me. This is a message." "Then we respond accordingly," Theo said, his voice like gravel. "Full retaliation. Burn their operations to the ground." "Not yet." The Mafia boss released my hand, but only to guide me toward the leather couch against the wall, sitting me down like I might shatter if he wasn't careful. "First, we find the brother. Then we discuss how thoroughly we destroy them." He turned back to his men, issuing rapid-fire orders about surveillance, informants, and tactical positioning, and I watched the way they listened with absolute attention, never questioning, never hesitating. This was real power, not the kind that came from money or status, but the kind that came from respect, mixed with just enough fear to keep people loyal. When Marcus and Theo finally left, the Mafia boss moved to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a crystal decanter of amber liquid. He poured 2 glasses, brought one to me, and settled into the chair across from the couch, his dark eyes never leaving my face. "Drink," he said quietly. "You're shaking." I was. I hadn't even noticed. I took the glass with both hands to keep from dropping it and swallowed a mouthful of what turned out to be extremely expensive whiskey. It burned going down, but the warmth helped steady me slightly. "I need to tell you something," he said after a long moment of silence, his voice lower now, almost hesitant. "And I need you to listen without interrupting." I nodded, not trusting my voice. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together, and for the first time since I'd started working for him, he looked almost uncertain, vulnerable in a way that seemed fundamentally wrong on someone like him. "I've been watching you, Nova," he said finally, and my breath caught. "For months, since the second week you started working here, not in the way you're thinking, not surveillance cameras or invasion of privacy, protective watching, making sure you got to your cars safely every night, making sure no one followed you home, making sure your name stayed off certain lists that people in my world keep." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "What lists?" "Leverage lists, target lists, the kind of lists that get civilians hurt when people want to send messages to people like me." His eyes were burning into mine now, intense and dark and full of something that looked dangerously close to obsession. 3 months ago, A rival family started asking questions about you. They disappeared before they could finish asking. 2 months ago, someone tried to follow you home from the coffee shop on 5th Street. They're in a hospital in Detroit now, too scared to come back to Illinois. And last month, he paused, his jaw working. Last month, someone put a trace on your phone number. I had it scrubbed and the person responsible eliminated before they could complete the trace. I couldn't breathe, couldn't process what he was telling me. You've been protecting me? Without telling me? I was trying to keep you out of this world, Nova, trying to keep you clean, separate. His voice dropped even lower, rough with frustration. But I failed. Because clearly someone figured out that you're… He stopped himself, his hands clenching into fists. That I'm what? I whispered. His eyes met mine, and the raw honesty in them nearly knocked me backward. That you're important to me. The air left my lungs entirely. The room spun. Everything I thought I understood about our professional relationship, about the careful distance we'd maintained, about the way he sometimes looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching, all of it suddenly made terrible, perfect sense. I will get your brother back, he said, his voice turning hard again, certain. I will find him. I will bring him home, and I will make the people who took him regret every decision that led them to touch what's mine. He stood towering over me, his presence overwhelming and absolute. I will not lose you, Nova. Not to fear, not to them, not to anyone. Do you understand? Before I could answer, his phone buzzed. He grabbed it, listened for 3 seconds, and his entire expression shifted into something predatory. They found something, he said, already moving toward the door. One of Vasquez's men was spotted at a warehouse in Pilsen 20 minutes ago. My heart lurched. Caleb, we're going. Now. He looked back at me, his eyes blazing with dark promise. And Nova? Stay close to me, because from this moment forward, you're not just my assistant anymore. You're under my protection. Completely. And as I followed him out of that office, my entire world tilting on its axis, I realized that everything had changed. Not just because my brother had been taken, but because the most dangerous man in Chicago had just claimed me as his. And there would be no going back from this. The warehouse in Pilsen was exactly what I'd imagined from every crime movie I'd ever watched. Abandoned, graffiti-covered, surrounded by rusted chain-link fencing that screamed forgotten and dangerous. But what I hadn't imagined was the small army that materialized within 15 minutes of our arrival. Black SUVs appearing from every direction. Armed men taking positions on rooftops. The Mafia boss's entire operation descending on this single location like a well-oiled machine designed for one purpose: violence. I stayed in the car like he'd ordered, watching through tinted windows as he moved through his soldiers with deadly grace, issuing commands with sharp hand gestures and clipped words I couldn't hear. Marcus appeared at his side with a tablet, showing him something that made his entire body go rigid. Then he turned and looked directly at the car. Directly at me. And the expression on his face made my blood run cold. He strode back with frightening speed, yanked open the door, and slid into the seat beside me. His jaw was clenched so tight I could see the veins in his neck pulsing, his hands curled into fists on his thighs, and when he finally spoke, his voice was vibrating with barely controlled rage. It wasn't about your father's debt, he said, each word clipped and precise and laced with fury. The Vasquez cartel doesn't give a damn about some low-level gambling debt from 3 years ago. My stomach dropped. What? He turned the tablet toward me, and I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Photos. Surveillance photos. Of me. Leaving the office building, getting into my car, walking into my apartment. Dozens of them, time-stamped over the past 6 weeks. They've been watching you, he continued, his voice getting darker with every word. Tracking your movements, building a profile, and yesterday they confirmed what they suspected. His eyes met mine, blazing with something between fury and anguish. That you work for me, that you're close to me, that taking your brother would hurt me in ways that burning down my operations or killing my soldiers never could. The words hit me like physical blows. No, no, that's not. They didn't take Caleb because of debt, Nova. His hand shot out, gripping my chin with enough force to make me meet his eyes. They took him because of me. Because someone in their organization figured out that you're not just my assistant, that you're. He stopped himself, breathing hard through his nose. That you matter to me. The guilt crashed over me like a tidal wave, drowning everything else. Oh my God, I whispered, my voice breaking. This is my fault. Caleb is. He's in danger because you. Don't. The word came out like a gunshot. Don't you dare blame yourself for what these animals did. They made this choice. They targeted you. They're the ones who'll pay for it. But I couldn't hear him over the roaring in my ears, over the horrible realization crashing through my mind. My little brother, 20 years old, studying engineering, completely innocent, was being held by cartel members because I'd gotten too close to a man I should have kept at arm's length. Because somewhere in the past 11 months, I'd stopped being just an employee and become something more dangerous, something that could be weaponized against him. I should quit, I said suddenly, desperately. After we get Caleb back, I should leave, disappear. They can't use me against you if I'm. He moved so fast I didn't see it coming. One second I was spiraling into panic, and the next his hands were on either side of my face, holding me still, forcing me to look at him. You're not going anywhere, he said, his voice dropping to something dangerous and possessive and absolute. Do you understand me, Nova? You're not quitting, you're not leaving, you're not disappearing, you're mine, and I protect what's mine. But Caleb will be returned safely because I'm going to burn their entire organization to the ground if that's what it takes. His thumbs brushed across my cheekbones, surprisingly gentle despite the fury radiating from every line of his body. This isn't your fault. This is theirs, and they're going to learn exactly what happens when someone tries to hurt what belongs to me. He released me and exploded out of the car, the door slamming behind him with enough force to make the entire vehicle shake. I watched through the window as he transformed completely. The man who'd just touched my face with tenderness vanishing beneath the kingpin who ruled through fear and respect and absolute ruthless efficiency. He started pacing like a caged predator, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing violently as he barked orders. I could see his soldiers tensing, straightening, moving with increased urgency. Marcus was on his own phone, coordinating something that required 3 other men to cluster around him with maps and tablets. Theo had pulled out what looked like enough weapons to outfit a small militia, distributing them with practiced efficiency. The Mafia boss ended his call and immediately made another. Then another. And another. Each conversation seemed to set something new in motion. Cars peeling away from the warehouse, helicopters appearing in the distance, entire blocks of the city being locked down, or cleared out, or monitored. I was watching Chicago itself bend to his will, reshape itself around his rage, and the sheer scale of his power was both terrifying and mesmerizing. He came back to the car 20 minutes later, sliding into the seat beside me with slightly more control, but no less intensity. His eyes were still blazing, his jaw still tight, but there was something else there now, too. Something calculated and cold and absolutely certain. I have 32 soldiers moving on known Vasquez locations across the city, he said, his voice steady despite the fury underneath. Another 15 watching every border in and out of Chicago. 6 of my best interrogators are currently having conversations with people who might know where they're keeping Caleb, and I've just put a $5 million bounty on any information that leads directly to your brother's location." My breath caught. 5 million? I'd pay 50 million if that's what it took. He turned to face me fully, his dark eyes burning into mine. "I'd burn this entire city to ash if it meant keeping you safe. Do you understand what I'm telling you, Nova? They didn't just take your brother, they declared war. Against me. Against everything I've built. And they made their first mistake when they thought hurting you would weaken me." "But I am your weakness," I whispered, the words tearing out of me. "That's what they're counting on. That you'll... No." He cut me off, his hand finding mine and gripping tight. "They took your brother because they thought you were my weakness. They were wrong." His voice dropped to something fierce and possessive and utterly unshakable. "You are my war, Nova. You're the reason I'm about to show the Vasquez cartel exactly why people don't touch what belongs to me. You're the reason I'm going to make them regret ever learning your name." A phone buzzed. Not his, Marcus's. I watched through the window as the second-in-command answered, listened for 3 seconds, and then his head snapped toward our car, his expression shifting into something urgent. The Mafia boss was out of the vehicle before I could blink, striding toward Marcus with predatory focus. They spoke in low, rapid tones, Marcus gesturing at his tablet, and I saw the exact moment the information registered. The Mafia boss's entire body went still, deadly still. Then he turned back toward the car, and the look on his face made my heart stop. "They just made contact," he said, as he climbed back in, his voice vibrating with dark anticipation. "The Vasquez cartel wants to negotiate." Hope and fear exploded in my chest simultaneously. "Caleb, is he—" "They're offering a trade." His eyes met mine, and I saw something there that terrified me more than anything else that had happened today. "They want to meet, tomorrow night, neutral territory." His jaw clenched. "And they specifically requested that you be present." The world tilted sideways. "What?" "They want you there, Nova. At the negotiation." His hand found my face again, tilting my chin up, forcing me to see the absolute conviction in his eyes. "Which means they're about to learn their second mistake. Because I don't negotiate. I eliminate threats. And anyone who thinks they can use you as leverage is about to discover exactly how wrong they were." His phone buzzed with incoming coordinates. The war had officially begun, and I was standing at the center of it. The abandoned textile factory in the industrial district looked like something pulled straight from a nightmare. All rusted metal beams, shattered windows, and shadows that seemed to breathe with malice. The Mafia boss had brought 12 soldiers, positioned strategically throughout the cavernous space, each one armed and ready to turn this negotiation into a bloodbath at the slightest provocation. I stood beside him, trying to control my shaking, trying to look stronger than I felt, while his hands stayed locked possessively on my lower back. "Stay close," he'd murmured before we entered. "Don't speak unless I tell you to, and if anything happens, you drop to the ground immediately. Understood?" I'd nodded, too terrified to do anything else. Now we stood in the center of the factory floor. Fluorescent work lights casting harsh shadows across the concrete, and I watched as Carlos Vasquez emerged from the darkness on the opposite side like something demonic crawling from hell itself. He was shorter than the Mafia boss, but built like someone who'd spent a lifetime inflicting violence, broad-shouldered, scarred, with slicked-back hair, and a smile that made my skin crawl. He wore an expensive suit that didn't quite hide the weapons holstered beneath it, and he moved with the kind of arrogant confidence that came from never being told no. "Ah," Carlos said, his accent thick as his eyes swept over me with undisguised hunger. "So this is the precious assistant everyone's talking about, the one who made Chicago's most feared kingpin go soft." The Mafia boss's hand tightened on my back, a warning. You have 30 seconds to tell me where the brother is before I decide negotiation isn't worth my time. So impatient. Carlos gestured lazily, and two of his men dragged a laptop forward, turning the screen toward us. My heart stopped. The video feed showed Caleb, tied to a chair, blindfolded, breathing but clearly terrified. Alive. See? Perfectly healthy, for now. What do you want? The mafia boss's voice was cold enough to freeze blood. What do I want? Carlos laughed, the sound echoing off the factory walls. I want recognition, respect. I want Chicago to remember that the Vasquez cartel doesn't bow to anyone, not even the legendary mafia boss with his fancy suits and military discipline. He took 3 steps closer, his eyes never leaving me. But mostly, I want compensation for all the trouble you've caused my operations over the years, the territories you've stolen, the men you've killed, the deals you've destroyed. Name your price. Oh, it's not about money. Carlos's smile widened, predatory and vile, and my stomach turned to ice. I want something much more valuable. His gaze raked over me again, lingering in ways that made me want to shower for hours. Give me one night with her, and the brother walks free. No harm, no questions. Just one night to see what's got Chicago's most dangerous man so distracted. The words hung in the air like poison. Everything happened so fast I barely processed it. The mafia boss moved like lightning, 1 second standing beside me, the next launching himself at Carlos with murder in his eyes. His fist connected with Carlos's jaw with a sickening crack that echoed through the factory, sending the cartel leader sprawling backward into his men. Guns appeared instantly, pointed from every direction, and suddenly we were seconds away from a massacre. "Boss, no!" Marcus shouted, and 3 of the mafia boss's soldiers grabbed him, hauling him back with visible effort. He was snarling like an animal, fighting against their grip, his eyes blazing with a fury so intense it was terrifying to witness. "You're dead," he growled, the words vibrating with lethal promise. "You're fucking dead for even suggesting." "Stop!" The word tore from my throat before I could think. Everyone froze, all eyes snapping to me. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might burst, but I forced myself to take a step forward, forced myself to meet Carlos's smug, bloodied smile. "If it saves Caleb," my voice cracked, but I pushed through. "I'll go." The silence that followed was deafening. Then the mafia boss exploded. "No!" The single word came out with such absolute finality, such devastating force, that I actually took a step back. His men released him, and he closed the distance between us in 2 strides, his hands gripping my shoulders hard enough to bruise. His voice dropped to something deadly soft, more terrifying than any shout. "You will never sacrifice yourself for anyone, you hear me? Never. Not for your brother, not for anyone. I don't care what they threaten. I don't care what they promise. You are not a bargaining chip. You are not negotiable. And you are sure as hell not spending 1 second with that piece of shit. But Caleb will be returned safely because I'm going to get him back my way." He turned back to Carlos, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "You want to prove the Vasquez cartel doesn't bow? Fine. Let's do this the old way. Trial by combat. You and me, one-on-one. No weapons, no interference. Fight to submission." Carlos wiped blood from his lip, his expression shifting from smug to calculating. "And if I win?" "You won't." "But if I win," Carlos pressed, "I get the girl, and you back off all Vasquez territory for 2 years. "And when I win," the mafia boss countered, his voice like gravel, "the brother goes free immediately. You leave Chicago permanently. And the Vasquez cartel never speaks her name again. Ever." The factory went silent, except for the sound of my ragged breathing. This was insane. This was deal. Carlos extended his hand with a grin that said he thought he'd already won. Tomorrow night, the old warehouse district, 8 p.m. We'll make it a proper show, invite the families, make it official. Let everyone see what happens when someone challenges Chicago's king. The Mafia boss didn't shake his hand. He just stared at Carlos with cold promise. Tomorrow night, then. And Vasquez, start saying goodbye to Chicago. You're not going to survive what's coming. He turned, grabbed my hand with bruising force, and pulled me toward the exit. I stumbled after him, my mind reeling, my heart shattering into pieces as the full weight of what just happened crashed over me. He was going to fight, really fight, risk his life, for Caleb, for me, because I'd stupidly offered myself as a trade. We made it to the SUV before I broke. "You can't do this," I gasped, grabbing his arm as he reached for the door. "You can't risk everything for—" He spun on me, and the raw emotion in his eyes nearly knocked me backward. "Do you have any idea what you almost did in there?" His voice was shaking, actually shaking, with fury and fear and something else I couldn't name. "Do you have any concept of what would have happened if I'd let you go with him? What he would have done to you? What it would have done to me? I was trying to save my brother. By destroying yourself!" He grabbed my face between his hands, forcing me to look at him. "You think I could live with that? You think I could survive knowing I traded you to save someone else, even if that someone is your brother? You think I'm that weak?" "You're not weak," I whispered, tears spilling down my cheeks. "You're the strongest person I know. But you shouldn't have to fight him. You shouldn't have to risk. I would fight 100 men like Carlos Vasquez if it meant keeping you safe." His thumbs brushed away my tears, his voice softening just slightly. "I would burn this entire city down. I would start a war that never ends. I would sacrifice everything I've built. Don't you understand that yet, Nova? You're not just someone I'm protecting. You're—" He stopped himself, jaw clenching. "You're everything." The words hung between us, heavy and impossible and terrifying. "Tomorrow night," he said finally, releasing my face and opening the car doors. "I'm going to end this. And then we're going to have a very serious conversation about you ever offering to sacrifice yourself again." I slid into the car, trembling from head to toe, caught between fear for what tomorrow would bring, guilt for causing this entire nightmare, and something else, something warm and desperate and utterly terrifying that felt dangerously close to love. The Mafia boss climbed in beside me, and as we drove away from the factory, I realized with startling clarity that everything had shifted. This wasn't just about rescuing Caleb anymore. This was about survival, his and mine. And tomorrow night, everything would either end in salvation or complete destruction. The rooftop of his private building was a place I'd never been, 43 stories above Chicago, with nothing but glass railings between us and the glittering cityscape that stretched endlessly in every direction. The Mafia boss had brought me here without explanation, just grabbed my hand after hours of tense preparation and planning, and led me through private elevators and security checkpoints until we emerged into the cool night air. Now we stood at the edge of his empire. The city he controlled spread out beneath us like a kingdom made of light and shadow, and the silence between us felt heavier than any words we'd spoken in the past 24 hours. "I come here when I need to think," he said finally, his voice quiet in a way I'd never heard before. He wasn't wearing his usual suit jacket, just the white dress shirt with sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing the tattoos that covered his forearms in intricate patterns. His braids were slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through them, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked almost human, vulnerable. "When the weight of everything gets too heavy, when I need to remember why I'm doing this." I wrapped my arms around myself against the breeze, unable to look away from his profile. "And why are you doing this?" He was quiet for a long moment, his hands gripping the railing hard enough that his knuckles went white. "I had a brother," he said finally, and the words came out rough, like they'd been buried so deep he'd almost forgotten how to speak them. "Younger than me by 3 years. Dante. He was—" His voice cracked slightly. "He was everything I wasn't. Kind, optimistic, believed people could change, that the world wasn't just violence and territory and blood." My heart clenched. What happened to him? "Cartel ambush. 8 years ago." His jaw tightened, and I watched him fight for control. I was 24, just starting to build what would become my organization. Dante wanted nothing to do with it. He was in college, studying architecture, planning to design buildings that would make the city more beautiful. But they took him anyway, used him as leverage against me, told me they'd let him go if I surrendered 3 territories and paid them $5 million. "Did you?" I whispered. "I paid 10 million, gave them 4 territories, did everything they asked." His voice dropped to something hollow and broken. "They killed him anyway, left his body in an alley in Cicero with a note pinned to his chest that said, 'This is what happens when you try to negotiate with animals.'" "Oh God, I'm so sorry." "I burned them all." He turned to face me then, and the rawness in his eyes was devastating. "Every single person involved in my brother's death. It took me 2 years, but I found them all, and I made sure they suffered. And when it was over, when I'd eliminated the entire organization that took him from me, I swore I would never let it happen again. That I would never care about someone enough to make them a target. That I would never—" He stopped, his throat working. "That I would never fall for someone and put them in danger the way I put Dante in danger." The confession hung between us, loaded with meaning I was too afraid to fully acknowledge. "But then you walked into my office 11 months ago," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "With your perfect posture and your professional smile and your ability to handle absolute chaos without flinching. And I told myself it was fine, that you were just an employee, that I could keep you at a distance. But every day, Nova, every single day, you made that impossible. The way you organized my life. The way you never showed fear even when you should have. The way you looked at me like I was a person, instead of a monster." Tears were streaming down my face now, unstoppable. "You're not a monster. I've done monstrous things. To protect people, to build something, to survive." I moved closer, closing the distance between us, until I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "You're the most complicated, terrifying, impossible man I've ever met, but you're not a monster. Monsters don't feel guilt. They don't spend 8 years mourning a brother. They don't risk everything to save the family of someone they—" I stopped myself, terrified of finishing that sentence. "Someone they what?" His hand came up, cupping my face with that same gentleness that never failed to shock me. "Say it, Nova." But I couldn't, because saying it would make it real, would make this thing between us undeniable and dangerous and completely impossible to walk away from. Instead, I let my own confession spill out. The truth I'd been carrying since the moment my father died, and left me with a traumatized 15-year-old brother and debts I couldn't pay. "I've been alone for so long," I whispered, my voice breaking. 5 years of raising Caleb by myself, working 3 jobs to keep us fed. Lying awake at night terrified that I was failing him, that I wasn't enough, that one day he'd realize his sister couldn't actually protect him from anything. The tears came harder now, years of fear and exhaustion pouring out. And then I started working for you, and for the first time in my entire adult life, I felt safe, which is insane because you're literally the most dangerous person in Chicago. But every day I walked into that office and you were there this constant, unmovable force, and I started believing that maybe the world wasn't entirely cruel, that maybe someone actually had my back. His other hand found my waist, pulling me closer. "You're not alone anymore." But that's exactly the problem. I looked up at him through blurred vision. Because now Caleb's in danger because of me. Because I let myself get too close to you. My voice broke completely. Because I fell for you even though I knew better. Even though I knew this world would destroy anyone who got too close. Nova, tomorrow you're going to fight a cartel leader in hand-to-hand combat, I continued desperately. You could die, and it'll be my fault, because I'm the one who made you care. I'm the one who... He kissed me. Not gently, not carefully. He kissed me like he was drowning, and I was air, like the world was ending, and this was his last chance, like every ounce of restraint he'd maintained for 11 months had finally shattered completely. His hand fisted in my hair, tilting my head back, and I melted into him, into the heat and strength and desperate intensity of it, tasting the whiskey on his tongue and feeling his heart hammering against mine. For one perfect, devastating moment, nothing else existed. Not the fight tomorrow, not the danger, not the impossible circumstances that should have kept us apart. Just him and me and this thing between us that had been building for months, finally exploding into something undeniable. Then he pulled back, resting his forehead against mine, both of us breathing hard. "After the fight," he whispered roughly, his thumb tracing my bottom lip, "when I come back alive, when your brother is safe and the Vasquez cartel is destroyed, and we have time to do this right, then I'm going to finish what I just started. I'm going to take you somewhere private and show you exactly how long I've wanted this, but not now. Not when there's still a chance I might..." He stopped himself, jaw clenching. "Don't say it." My hands clutched his shirt, holding him close. "Don't even think it. I have to think it. Because if something happens tomorrow, nothing is going to happen. You're going to win. You're going to destroy Carlos Vasquez and get Caleb back and come back to me. Because you promised. You promised you wouldn't lose me." His eyes searched mine, dark and intense, and filled with something that looked like both love and terror. "I need you to promise me something. Anything. If tomorrow doesn't go the way we plan, if something happens to me, you take Marcus and Theo and you disappear. You take Caleb and you leave Chicago and you never look back. Promise me." "I can't." "Promise me, Nova." His voice turned desperate, almost broken. "Promise me you'll survive this even if I don't. Promise me you'll live and be happy and forget about the dangerous man who dragged you into his world. Please." The tears were flowing freely now, soaking into his shirt where I pressed my face against his chest. "I promise," I whispered, the lie tasting like ash on my tongue. Because we both knew the truth. If something happened to him tomorrow, I would never forget, would never move on, would never be the same person I was before he made me believe that dangerous men could have hearts worth protecting. We stood there on that rooftop for what felt like hours, holding each other as the city glowed beneath us and the weight of tomorrow pressed down on both our shoulders. And when he finally pulled away, pressing one last kiss to my forehead with devastating gentleness, I knew with absolute certainty that everything had changed between us. This wasn't just about protection anymore. This was love, desperate and dangerous and completely impossible. And tomorrow, in that warehouse, we'd either save it or lose it forever. The warehouse in the old industrial district had been transformed into something medieval and terrifying. A makeshift arena with chain-link barriers forming a crude ring. Work lights flooding the center with harsh white light that cast brutal shadows across the concrete floor. Bodies packed every available space around the perimeter. Representatives from every major family in Chicago, neutral observers from Detroit and Milwaukee, and what looked like half the city's underground watching with hungry, predatory eyes. This wasn't just a fight. This was a spectacle. a public declaration of power, and I was about to watch the man I loved possibly die in the center of it all. Stay with Marcus, the Mafia boss had told me before entering the ring, his hands cupping my face with devastating gentleness. No matter what happens, you stay behind the barrier. Promise me. I'd promised. But now, standing pressed against the cold metal with Marcus's solid presence at my back and my heart hammering so violently, I thought my ribs might crack. That promise felt impossible to keep. The Mafia boss stood in the center of the ring, shirtless now, his tattooed torso and arms on full display. Every muscle defined, every scar visible, looking like some ancient warrior carved from stone and fury. His braids were tied back, his dark eyes focused with lethal intensity. And when he rolled his shoulders and cracked his neck, the crowd's energy shifted into something electric and dangerous. Across from him, Carlos Vasquez stripped off his own shirt, revealing a body built for violence. Thicker, heavier, covered in scars that told stories of survived brutality. He was grinning like this was entertainment, like he'd already won, and the arrogance in that smile made my stomach turn with rage and fear. "Last chance to back out," Carlos called out, his voice carrying across the warehouse. "Give me the girl and I'll let you keep your dignity." The Mafia boss didn't respond. He just shifted into a fighting stance, weight balanced, hands loose, every line of his body radiating controlled danger. And the message was clear. There would be no backing out, no mercy, no surrender. A neutral observer, some old Italian man in an expensive suit, raised his hand. "Rules are simple. Fight until submission, unconsciousness, or death. No weapons, no interference. Understood?" Both men nodded. The hand dropped. They collided like hurricanes. Carlos moved first, lunging forward with a haymaker that would have shattered bone, but the Mafia boss was faster, ducking under the blow and driving his fist into Carlos's ribs with sickening force. The sound of impact echoed through the warehouse, followed immediately by Carlos's grunt of pain. The Mafia boss didn't stop. He was a weapon unleashed, throwing combinations that were too fast to fully track, each strike landing with brutal precision. The crowd roared. Carlos stumbled backward, already bleeding from his mouth, but he recovered quickly, charging forward and managing to catch the Mafia boss with an elbow to the jaw that snapped his head sideways. My heart stopped. Actually stopped. I watched him stagger, watched blood appear at the corner of his mouth, and a sound escaped my throat, something between a gasp and a scream. "He's fine," Marcus murmured beside me, his voice steady despite the tension radiating from his body. "Boss has taken worse. He knows what he's doing." But it didn't feel fine. It felt like watching someone I loved walk through fire and hoping he'd survive the burning. The Mafia boss wiped the blood from his mouth with the back of his hand, his eyes never leaving Carlos, and when he moved again it was with renewed fury. He was controlled violence personified, every strike calculated, every movement efficient, no wasted energy. A knee to Carlos's stomach that doubled him over, an elbow to the spine that sent him crashing to his knees, a brutal kick that sent him sprawling across the concrete. The crowd was chanting now, a rhythmic primal sound that made the entire warehouse pulse with bloodlust. Carlos struggled to his feet, breathing hard, his earlier arrogance crumbling into desperation. "You're going to regret this," he snarled, spitting blood onto the floor. "You're going to—" The Mafia boss hit him so hard I heard something crack. Carlos went down again, his face already swelling, his movements becoming slower and less coordinated. This was it. The fight was ending. The Mafia boss was going to— Carlos's hand moved too fast, too deliberately. And suddenly there was a flash of metal, a hidden blade appearing from somewhere, and before anyone could react, he was lunging forward with the weapon aimed directly at the Mafia boss's throat. "No!" The scream tore from my throat, raw and desperate. The Mafia boss twisted at the last second, instinct and training saving his life, but not fast enough to avoid injury completely. The blade sliced across his shoulder, opening a deep gash that immediately started bleeding, painting his tattooed skin crimson. He stumbled backward, his hand going to the wound, and for one horrible moment I thought he was going down. The crowd erupted in chaos, shouts of cheater and disqualified mixing with roars of encouragement, the neutral families demanding Carlos's immediate forfeit. But Carlos wasn't listening. He was advancing with the blade, desperate now, knowing he'd just violated every rule and his only chance of survival was finishing this. But the Mafia boss refused to fall. He straightened despite the blood streaming down his arm, despite the pain that must have been radiating through his body, and his expression shifted into something absolutely terrifying. Not anger, not even rage, pure, cold, calculated fury. "Big mistake," he said quietly, and then he moved. What happened next was barely human. The Mafia boss became something else, something primal and unstoppable, fighting through the injury like it didn't exist. He dodged Carlos's desperate slashes, caught the man's wrist mid-swing and twisted so viciously I heard bones snap. The blade clattered to the ground. Carlos screamed. And the Mafia boss drove his knee into Carlos's face with such devastating force that the cartel leader went down hard and didn't get back up. The warehouse went silent except for the sound of the Mafia boss's ragged breathing. He stood over Carlos's unconscious body, blood dripping from his shoulder onto the concrete, his chest heaving, his dark eyes scanning the crowd with lethal authority. "Anyone else want to question who runs this city?" His voice carried across the warehouse like thunder. No one answered. No one dared. "Get him up," the Mafia boss ordered, gesturing at Carlos. "And get Caleb, now!" I didn't remember moving, didn't remember breaking through the barrier or crossing the ring. I just suddenly found myself pressed against his uninjured side, my hands shaking as they hovered over his wound, tears streaming down my face as I looked up at him. "You're bleeding," I choked out. "I'm fine." His arm came around me, holding me close despite the pain he must have been in. "I told you, I don't lose." "He cheated. He could have killed you. But he didn't." His hand found my chin, tilting my face up so I had to meet his eyes. "And now it's over. You're safe. Caleb's safe. And the Vasquez cartel is finished." Movement at the edge of the ring caught my attention. Two of his soldiers were bringing someone forward, a blindfolded figure stumbling between them, and my heart lurched. "Caleb!" I broke away from the Mafia boss, running toward my brother as they removed the blindfold. His eyes found mine, confused and terrified, and then I was throwing my arms around him, sobbing into his shoulder as he held me with shaking hands. "Nova? What? Where are we? What's happening?" "You're safe," I whispered desperately. "You're safe. I've got you. I've got you!" Behind me, I heard the Mafia boss giving orders, his voice strong despite his injury, commanding Carlos's removal, dismissing the crowd, reclaiming his authority. And I knew with absolute certainty that this man, this dangerous, impossible, beautiful man, had just fought death itself and won. For me, for Caleb, for us. The war wasn't over yet, but we'd survived the most brutal battle, and somehow, impossibly, we'd survived it together. I was so focused on the Mafia boss, on the way he moved through the fight like controlled destruction, on the blood streaming from his shoulder, on the terrifying moment when Carlos's blade had come so close to ending everything, that I didn't notice the figure moving behind me until it was too late. A hand brushed against mine, quick, deliberate, pressing something cold and rectangular into my palm before disappearing back into the crowd. A phone. My stomach dropped instantly, instinct screaming that something was wrong. I glanced down at the device, a cheap burner, screen already glowing, and my hands started shaking before I even saw what was displayed. A video, playing automatically. No sound at first, just grainy footage of a dimly lit room with concrete walls and a single hanging bulb casting sickly yellow light across. Caleb, my brother, tied to a metal chair, blindfold covering his eyes, duct tape across his mouth, his chest rising and falling too quickly, panic evident in every line of his body, even though he couldn't see his surroundings. "No," I whispered, the word barely audible over the roaring crowd. "No, no, no!" The camera zoomed closer, focusing on Caleb's terrified face, and then a voice began speaking, digitally distorted, mechanical, absolutely devoid of humanity. "Enjoying the show?" the voice asked, and ice flooded my veins. "Your boss is very entertaining, very skilled, but here's the thing about trial by combat. It's a distraction." The camera panned slightly, showing another figure entering the frame. A man in a black mask holding a gun with a silencer attached. "We're going to kill him whether your boss wins or not. In exactly..." The video showed a timestamp counting down. 17 minutes. Maybe sooner if we get bored. The man in the mask pressed the gun against Caleb's temple. My brother flinched violently, a muffled scream trying to escape through the tape. "Your boss thinks he's saving someone," the voice continued, almost amused. "But all he's doing is buying us time to finish what we started. The boy dies tonight. The only question is whether you sit there and watch your boss celebrate a meaningless victory, or whether you actually try to save your brother." The video ended. The phone went dark, and my entire world shattered into pieces. My hands were shaking so violently I nearly dropped the device. My vision blurred, edges going dark as panic crashed over me like a physical force. Behind me in the ring, I could hear the crowd roaring as the Mafia boss delivered another devastating blow to Carlos, could hear Marcus shouting encouragement, could feel the energy of impending victory. But none of it mattered, because Caleb wasn't here. Caleb wasn't being released. Caleb was somewhere else entirely with a gun to his head, and a timer counting down to his execution. This was never about the fight. The fight was theater, distraction, a way to keep the Mafia boss occupied while they murdered my brother in some hidden location. "Oh God," I gasped, doubling over as my lungs refused to work properly. "Oh God, oh God." A hand gripped my shoulder, firm but not rough. I looked up through tear-blurred vision to find Theo, the Mafia boss's head of security, staring at me with sharp, assessing eyes. "What's wrong?" he demanded quietly, his voice cutting through my panic. "What happened?" I couldn't speak, could only thrust the phone toward him with shaking hands. He took it, watched the video with an expression that grew darker with each second, and then his jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. "Marcus needs to know," he started, already reaching for his radio. "No." The word came out stronger than I expected. I grabbed his arm, nails digging in. "No, we don't have time. The Mafia boss can't know. He'll abandon the fight, and Carlos will..." My voice cracked. 17 minutes, Theo. Less now. We have to go. Now. "Miss Scott, I can't just..." "You can, and you will." Something inside me shifted in that moment, something fundamental and irreversible. The fear that had been drowning me transformed into something else entirely, something cold and sharp and absolutely furious. My hands stopped shaking, my vision cleared, and when I looked at Theo, I knew he could see the change written across my face. "Give me a gun." His eyes widened slightly. "What?" "You heard me." I held out my hand, palm up, steady now despite the adrenaline screaming through my system. "Give me a weapon. Right now. Because I'm going after my brother, whether you help me or not, and I'd rather not do it unarmed." "Boss will kill me if I..." "The boss will kill you if my brother dies because you stood here arguing with me." My voice dropped to something deadly calm. "Please, Theo, I know you have protocols. I know you have orders. But that's my baby brother with a gun to his head, and I will walk out of this warehouse alone if I have to, so either help me or get out of my way. For 3 heartbeats, he just stared at me. Then, with a muttered curse that sounded like both prayer and resignation, he reached beneath his jacket and pulled out a compact Glock, pressing it into my hands with practiced efficiency. "Safety's here," he said quickly, showing me. "Point and shoot. Don't hesitate. And for God's sake, stay behind us." Us? He was already gesturing to 2 other soldiers positioned nearby. Younger men with hungry eyes who looked like they'd been waiting their entire lives for permission to prove themselves. They materialized at Theo's signal, weapons already drawn, expressions shifting to combat readiness. "You two, with me," Theo commanded. "We have a secondary target. Potential hostage situation. Radio silence until we have confirmation. Move." The gun felt impossibly heavy in my hands. Foreign and terrifying and somehow exactly right. I'd never held a weapon before. Never wanted to, never thought I'd need to. But now, with Caleb's terrified face burned into my memory and that distorted voice promising murder, I felt my fear crystallize into something harder, something that could pull a trigger if necessary. "Do you know where he is?" I asked as we moved quickly through the crowd toward the exit, using the chaos of the fight as cover. Video showed concrete walls, industrial fixtures, single bulb. Matches 3 possible locations in Vasquez territory. Theo was typing rapidly on his phone as we walked, his voice clipped and efficient. Cross-referencing with recent activity reports. Got it. Abandoned meatpacking plant in Bridgeport. 8 minutes away if we drive like hell. We burst through the warehouse exit into the cold night air, and one of the soldiers was already pulling an SUV around, engine running. I climbed in without hesitation, my heart pounding, but my hands still steady on the weapon. Theo took the front passenger seat, the other soldier driving, and we peeled out of the parking lot with enough force to leave rubber on the concrete. 15 minutes left, I said, checking the timestamp I'd memorized. Maybe less. We'll make it, Theo said, loading his own weapon with mechanical precision. But Miss Scott, when we get there, you stay in the vehicle until we clear. No. Miss Scott. That's my brother in there, Theo. My responsibility. My fault. I met his eyes in the rear-view mirror, and whatever he saw there made him stop arguing. I'm going in. You can accept that, or waste time fighting me about it. He was quiet for a long moment, then nodded once. Stay behind us. Do exactly what I say, and if I tell you to run, you run. Understood? Understood. The city blurred past the windows as we raced through back streets and industrial zones. Every second feeling like an hour, every red light we ran through making my heart jump into my throat. The gun sat heavy in my lap. My phone, my real phone, was buzzing with what had to be Marcus trying to reach me, but I ignored it. Ignored everything except the single-minded focus of getting to Caleb before that timer ran out. 2 minutes out, the driver announced. I checked the Glock's safety one more time, remembered Theo's instructions. Point and shoot. Don't hesitate. And I realized with startling clarity that I'd crossed a line tonight. The professional assistant who never asked questions, who kept her hands clean and her conscience clear, that person was gone. Dead. Replaced by someone who could hold a weapon and mean it. Someone who would walk into a cartel hideout and fight if that's what it took to save family. As the Mafia boss had told me I was his war. But tonight, I'd become my own. There, Theo said, pointing ahead at a dark, hulking structure surrounded by chain-link fencing. That's it. Kill the lights. We coasted to a stop a block away, and I watched as Theo and his soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, checking weapons, securing gear, communicating in hand signals that spoke to years of training. Then Theo looked at me, his expression serious. Last chance to stay here, Miss Scott. I stepped out of the vehicle, gun in hand, and met his gaze with absolute certainty. Let's go get my brother. The meatpacking plant smelled like death and rust and years of abandoned violence. We approached through a gap in the chain-link fence, moving in formation, Theo in front, me in the middle, the two soldiers flanking, and every step felt like walking deeper into a nightmare I couldn't wake from. My entire body was trembling, not just my hands anymore, but everything, legs barely holding my weight, teeth chattering despite the adrenaline heating my blood, the gun feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds even though I knew it couldn't be more than 2. I'd never held a weapon with the intention of using it. Never imagined pointing it at another human being and pulling the trigger. But for Caleb, I would become someone capable of anything. Theo raised his fist, the signal to stop. We pressed against the corrugated metal wall as he peered around the corner, then gestured forward. 2 fingers, 2 guards. He and one soldier moved with silent efficiency, and I heard rather than saw what happened. Muffled sounds of struggle. Bodies hitting concrete, then nothing. Clear, Theo whispered, waving us forward. We entered through a side door that hung crooked on broken hinges. The interior was exactly like the video. Concrete walls stained with God knows what, industrial fixtures dangling from the ceiling, that sickly yellow light that made everything look diseased, but bigger than I'd expected. Labyrinthine. Rooms branching off in multiple directions, and no clear indication which one held my brother. Spread out, Theo mouthed silently. Stick to pairs. You're with me. We moved deeper into the building, my heart hammering so loud I was certain everyone in Chicago could hear it. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every sound, dripping water, creaking metal, distant voices, made me jump. The gun in my hands felt both useless and terrifying, and I kept thinking about what would happen if I actually had to use it, if I actually had to. A door burst open to our left. A guard emerged, automatic weapon already rising, his eyes widening as he registered our presence. Time slowed to something viscous and horrible. I saw his finger moving toward the trigger, saw Theo starting to pivot, saw the barrel of that weapon swinging toward us with lethal intent. And I fired. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, louder than anything I'd ever heard, loud enough to make my ears ring and my hands recoil from the unexpected force. The guard stumbled backward, a red stain blooming across his chest, his weapon clattering to the concrete as his legs gave out beneath him. He fell, and didn't get back up. Move! Theo grabbed my arm, pulling me forward as shouts erupted from deeper in the building. No time to process, keep moving! But I couldn't stop staring at the body, at the man I'd just killed, at the blood spreading across the floor in ways that didn't look real, like movie props or special effects, except the smell was wrong, copper and cordite and something else that made my stomach heave violently. I'd just killed someone, ended a life, become exactly the kind of person I'd spent my entire existence trying not to be. Miss Scott, Theo's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. Your brother. Focus on your brother. Caleb. Right. Caleb was here somewhere with a gun to his head and minutes, maybe seconds, left before execution. I shoved the horror down deep, forced my legs to move, followed Theo as we raced through corridors that all looked identical. More guards appeared. Theo dropped 2 with precise headshots. The soldiers flanking us engaged others in brief, brutal exchanges. Gunfire echoed through the building like thunder, and somewhere distantly I realized we'd lost the element of surprise completely. This was turning into a war zone. There! One of the soldiers pointed at a door at the end of a hallway, light spilling from beneath it. That's got to be... Theo kicked the door open, and there was Caleb, still tied to the chair, still blindfolded. But now, the masked man from the video stood behind him, gun pressed directly against my brother's temple, finger on the trigger. One more step and I paint the walls with his brain, the man snarled, his voice no longer distorted, harsh and real and absolutely serious. Everything stopped. Theo froze mid-step, weapon raised. The soldiers halted in the doorway, and I stood there staring at my baby brother, at the terror written in every line of his bound body, at the gun that could end his life with a single squeeze. Nova? Caleb's voice came out muffled through the tape, but I heard my name, heard the confusion and fear and desperate hope in it. I'm here, I choked out, my own gun still raised, hands shaking again. I'm here, Caleb. I'm going to get you out. I promise. Touching, the masked man sneered. But promises don't mean shit when I shot him. Didn't think. Didn't hesitate. Didn't give him time to finish his sentence or pull his trigger or steal my brother from me. I just raised the gun, aimed for center mass like some instinct I didn't know I possessed told me to do, and fired 3 times in rapid succession. The masked man went down hard, his weapon discharging into the ceiling as he fell, and then Theo and the soldiers were rushing forward, securing the room, confirming the target was down, while I stumbled toward Caleb with tears streaming down my face. "I've got you," I sobbed, my shaking hands fumbling with the ropes binding his wrists. "I've got you. I've got you. I've got you." Theo cut through the restraints with a knife, and the moment Caleb's hands were free, he ripped off the blindfold and duct tape, his eyes finding mine, wide and terrified and confused. "Nova, what the hell? Where are we? How did you—" "No time," Theo interrupted, already pulling Caleb to his feet. "We need to move, now. More guards incoming and—" He pressed his earpiece, his expression darkening. "Shit! They're rigging explosives. This whole building's about to blow." Terror spiked fresh through my system. "How long?" "2 minutes. Maybe less. Run." We ran. Through corridors that seemed endless, past bodies and blood and chaos. Caleb stumbled beside me, weak from captivity, and I held him up with one arm while keeping the gun raised with the other. Behind us, I could hear shouting, gunfire, the sound of pursuit. Theo led us through a different exit than we'd entered, bursting through a loading dock door into the cold night air, just as the first explosion detonated behind us. The shockwave threw us forward, heat washing over my back, and I hit the concrete hard enough to knock the wind from my lungs. "Keep moving!" Theo shouted, hauling both me and Caleb to our feet. "Secondary charges, go!" We sprinted across the parking lot toward the SUV, and I could hear it now, the crackling, roaring sound of fire consuming the building, of structural supports giving way. Caleb was crying, asking questions I couldn't answer, and I just pulled him forward with desperate strength I didn't know I possessed. We reached the vehicle, threw ourselves inside. The driver peeled out before the doors were even fully closed, and through the back window I watched the meatpacking plant collapse in on itself, flames erupting into the night sky like something biblical and terrible. The building where my brother had been moments away from execution. The building where I'd killed 2 people. The building that nearly became our tomb. "You're okay," I whispered, pulling Caleb against me as sobs racked both our bodies. "You're okay, you're safe, I've got you. Nova, you had a gun. There was so much blood." His voice was breaking, traumatized and young and so desperately confused. "I know." I pressed my face against his hair, breathing in the familiar scent of my little brother beneath the smell of captivity and fear. "I know. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you had to see that. But you're safe now. You're safe." My hands were still shaking, still covered in gunpowder residue and probably blood. I didn't want to look closely enough to confirm. My ears were still ringing from gunfire. My heart was still hammering with adrenaline and terror and the horrible weight of what I'd just done. I'd killed 2 people tonight, ended 2 lives without hesitation, become someone I didn't recognize. But Caleb was alive, breathing, safe in my arms. And as the SUV raced through Chicago streets back toward the warehouse where the Mafia boss was still fighting, I realized with devastating clarity that I would do it all again. would pull that trigger 100 more times, would walk into hell itself if that's what protecting my brother required. The professional assistant was gone, the innocent woman was dead, and in her place was someone harder, darker, forever changed by violence and choice and desperate love. "Where are we going?" Caleb whispered against my shoulder. I held him tighter, watching the burning building disappear behind us. "Home," I lied. "We're going home." But I knew the truth. Home was wherever the Mafia boss was. And right now, that was a warehouse where a war was ending, and another kind of reckoning was about to begin. We arrived back at the warehouse just as the crowd's roar reached a fever pitch, that unmistakable sound of victory, of violence concluded, of power definitively claimed. Theo brought the SUV to a screeching halt outside the main entrance, and I could hear it even through the metal walls. Hundreds of voices chanting in unison, celebrating something brutal and final. "Stay here," Theo started, but I was already moving, already pushing open the door with Caleb's hand locked in mine. "I need to see him," I said, my voice hoarse from smoke and tears and screaming. "I need—" The warehouse doors burst open ahead of us, and suddenly we were inside, pushing through the crowd that parted instinctively when they saw Theo's soldiers flanking us. The ring came into view, the chain-link barriers, the blood-splattered concrete, the harsh work lights illuminating the center like a stage. And there, standing over Carlos Vasquez's unconscious body, bloodied and victorious and absolutely magnificent, was the Mafia boss. Our eyes met across the distance. Everything else disappeared. I watched his expression transform in real time, the cold, lethal mask of the victor melting into something I'd never seen before. Relief so profound it looked like pain, disbelief, joy, heartbreak, love. All of it crashing across his features simultaneously as his dark eyes moved from me to Caleb and back again, processing what he was seeing. I was alive. Caleb was alive. We were here. "Nova," he breathed, and even from across the warehouse I could hear my name in his voice, broken and reverent and filled with too many emotions to name. Then he was moving, not walking, running, crossing the distance between us with desperate speed, and I met him halfway, dragging Caleb with me. And suddenly we collided, all three of us, and the Mafia boss dropped to his knees on the concrete, pulling both of us down with him, his arms wrapping around us with crushing force. "You're alive," he gasped against my hair, his entire body shaking. How are you? I thought you were in the crowd, I thought you were safe, and then Marcus said you were gone and I couldn't—" His voice broke completely. "Oh God, Nova, what did you do?" I saved him. My hands fisted in his bloodied shirt, holding him as tightly as he held us. There was a video. They were going to kill him anyway. I had to. "You left." His hands came up to frame my face, tilting my head back so he could see me properly, his eyes scanning for injuries with frantic intensity. "You left the arena. You went after him yourself. I had Theo, and soldiers, and—" I was crying now, the adrenaline finally crashing, everything I'd been holding back flooding out in a rush. "I didn't have a choice. They had a gun to his head. They were going to execute him regardless of who won. So You went to war." His thumb brushed across my cheekbone and I realized he was crying too, silent tears cutting through the blood and sweat on his face. "My God, Nova, you went to war." "I learned from the best." A sound escaped him, half laugh, half sob, and then he was kissing my forehead, my temples, my cheeks, pressing his lips everywhere he could reach like he needed physical confirmation that I was real, that we were real. Caleb made a small, confused sound between us. "Nova?" "Who? What's happening? Who is this?" I pulled back slightly, looking at my baby brother's terrified, tear-stained face. "This is my boss," I said softly. "The man who just fought to save you. The man who—" I met the Mafia boss's eyes, saw everything written there. The man I love. The words hung in the air, undeniable and true and absolutely terrifying. The Mafia boss's breath caught. His eyes darkened with emotion so intense, it was almost painful to witness. Nova! A groan interrupted us. Carlos Vasquez was stirring, trying to crawl away from the ring despite his injuries, leaving a trail of blood across the concrete. The crowd that had been watching our reunion with shocked silence suddenly remembered why they were here, their energy shifting back to bloodlust. "Finish him!" someone shouted. "Make him pay!" The Mafia boss stood slowly, his hand finding mine and pulling me up with him. Caleb stayed close, clinging to my other side, as we watched Carlos struggle to his feet with pathetic desperation. "Please!" Carlos gasped, one eye already swollen shut. "I surrender. The fight's over. You won. Just let me—" The gunshot was deafening. Carlos screamed, his leg buckling as the bullet tore through his thigh. He went down hard, clutching the wound, and I realized with detached shock that the Mafia boss was holding a gun now, pulled from somewhere, aimed with casual precision. "You don't get to run," the Mafia boss said quietly, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent warehouse. "Not after what you tried to do." He crossed the distance in 3 strides, grabbed Carlos by the collar, and dragged him, screaming and bleeding, across the concrete until he was directly in front of me. Then he forced Carlos to his knees. "Look at her," the Mafia boss commanded, his voice like ice. "Look at the woman you tried to trade like property, the woman whose brother you kidnapped, the woman you thought you could use as leverage against me." Carlos lifted his head, hatred and fear warring in his remaining good eye. The Mafia boss pressed the gun into my hand. His hand. Our fingers tangled around the weapon together, and when he spoke again, his voice was directed at me. "Your choice, Nova," he said softly. "You've earned the right to end this however you want. Say the word, and I'll pull this trigger. Or I'll let him live, or I'll make him suffer for years. Whatever you need. Whatever brings you peace." I stared down at Carlos Vasquez, this man who'd terrorized my brother, who'd tried to use me, who'd started a war that nearly killed everyone I loved. My finger rested against the trigger. One squeeze. That's all it would take. Justice, vengeance, finality. I'd already killed 2 people tonight. What was one more? But as I looked at Carlos's terrified face, I realized something important. Killing him wouldn't give me peace, wouldn't erase the trauma, wouldn't make me feel safer or stronger or more whole. It would just make me more like him. "Let him live," I whispered, lowering the gun. "Not because he deserves mercy, but because I do. Because I choose not to become someone who executes kneeling men, no matter how much they might deserve it." The Mafia boss studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly, respect and something that looked like pride flickering in his dark eyes. "Exile," he announced to the crowd. "Carlos Vasquez leaves Chicago tonight. If he ever returns, if he ever speaks about what happened here, if he ever even thinks about the people in this room, I'll find him. And next time, there won't be mercy." He gestured, and soldiers descended on Carlos, dragging him away toward whatever fate awaited him outside Chicago's borders. The crowd began dispersing, the spectacle concluded, the power dynamics of the city's underworld permanently shifted. And suddenly, it was just us. Me, the Mafia boss, and Caleb, standing in the center of that bloodied ring while the warehouse emptied around us. "I need to get him medical attention," I said quietly, looking at Caleb's pale, traumatized face. "And probably therapy. And already arranged." The Mafia boss was texting rapidly with one hand, his other arm still around my waist like he couldn't bear to let go. "Marcus is bringing a doctor to my private residence. Caleb will be checked thoroughly, kept comfortable, and given whatever he needs. His eyes met mine. Both of you will. I killed people tonight, I whispered, the words finally breaking free. 2 of them. I shot them, and I didn't hesitate, and You saved your brother. His hand cupped my face with devastating gentleness. You did what needed to be done. And I'm so fucking sorry you had to do it. That I wasn't there. That you had to become someone you never wanted to be because I couldn't protect you both. You were fighting for us. And you were fighting for him. His forehead pressed against mine. We're quite a pair, aren't we? Both willing to burn the world down for the people we love. Caleb made another confused sound. Can someone please explain what's happening? Who are all these people? Why does everyone have guns? And Nova? His voice cracked. You shot someone. I saw you. You. I'll explain everything, I promised, turning to pull him into a fierce hug. I'll tell you the whole story, but right now, I just need you to know you're safe. That this is over. That no one will ever hurt you again. Okay? He nodded against my shoulder, still shaking, but alive. Breathing. Mine. Hours later, after Caleb had been examined and sedated and put to bed in one of the Mafia boss's guest rooms, after statements had been given and bodies had been removed and the warehouse had been cleared, I found myself standing on that same rooftop where we'd confessed our truths the night before. The Mafia boss emerged from the stairwell behind me, his shoulder now properly bandaged, wearing clean clothes that didn't smell like blood and violence. He moved to stand beside me at the railing, our shoulders touching, and for a long moment, we just stared at the city spread out beneath us. I'm sorry, he said finally, for all of it, for putting you in danger, for making you a target, for forcing you to become... I'm not sorry. The words came out stronger than I expected. I'm traumatized. I'm changed. I'll probably have nightmares for years. But I'm not sorry I saved Caleb. And I'm not sorry about you. He turned to face me fully, his dark eyes searching mine. Nova. I love you, I interrupted, needing to say it clearly. Definitely. Without the chaos of combat or the trauma of rescue clouding it. I love you. And I know that's probably insane. I know we've only been... I know this is all impossible and dangerous and... He kissed me. Not like the brief, desperate kiss on this rooftop the night before. This was different. Slower. Deeper. Thorough and claiming and filled with everything he'd been holding back for 11 months. His hands tangled in my hair, tilting my head to deepen the angle, and I melted into him completely, tasting possession and promise and absolutely unshakable devotion. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. I love you, he whispered roughly. I love you and I'm keeping you. You understand that, right? After tonight, after watching you walk into that warehouse covered in blood with your brother safe beside you, there's no version of reality where I let you go. You're mine, Nova Scott. Completely. Irreversibly. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. I smiled through my tears, my hands fisting in his shirt. I entered your world crying in a closet. And now? I looked out at Chicago. This city we'd both fought for. This empire we'd defended together. This dangerous, beautiful life we'd somehow built from violence and trust and impossible love. Now I'm standing beside you, I finished softly. Irreversibly changed, unbreakably strong, and claimed by the most dangerous man in Chicago. His arms tightened around me, and as the city glowed beneath us, I knew with absolute certainty that this was just the beginning. The war was over, but our story, dangerous and passionate and completely ours, was just starting, and I wouldn't have it any other way. If this video grabbed your attention, then you're not ready for what's coming next. So hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss another mind-blowing, jaw-dropping, captivating story. Trust me, the next video, you'll want to be here first. So turn on all notifications, join the family, and I'll see you in the next one.